Hey, Jamie.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. There's Yvonne, Bianca, Mallory, Shanda, Pam, Kevin. Everybody's just come alive here. Great. Good to see you all. Hope you're going to have a good holiday and try to stay out of the COVID. I came home today, so I'm going to be here for a few days. I'm happy.
Dr. Lamb, are you up for a couple of questions?
I am.
Please don't be frustrated with me. Okay, so I was just trying to handle the situation on my own, but then I realized other people had the same situation I did, so I'm just going to ask. When we go on to do the application, and I know you told me earlier to just click on the next one and they would move me.
Yep.
But the MELS option isn't there. So does it matter?
What options do you have?
Just for the doctoral program.
Yeah. Mallory got hers in a few minutes ago, I saw. Mallory, you want?
I just chose the EDCI one, the EDCI program. I just put it in there just like that, and then I emailed Wendy Turbofield, and I said, can you please just make sure I'm registered for MELS graduation? And I put it in for spring 2021.
Right. And
Okay.
I would say copy Wendy and copy Luann and Sherry. Luann Skates and Sherry Jackson, and they all work together because Wendy has to do your licensure, but they have to do your transcripts. And so as long as all three of them know, they'll manually move you. You just got to get registered.
Okay.
And then they'll move you to the appropriate place.
Okay. Thank you.
It's fairly, I know it's counterintuitive, but just get it in there is all that really matters.
Okay. Thank you.
Other housekeeping things before we get too far in, since this is our last night. I tell you what, I'm going to miss y'all. This has been the most fun I've had in a while. Just as a reminder, today is the 25th. You've got until Wednesday morning, December 9th, to get all your work in. Our final grades go in that morning. So you've got until then to get them in, since y'all don't participate in graduation unless you're in getting your EDCIs. Anybody walking this semester from ED? Jamie is. Congratulations, Jamie. Yay.
Thank you.
Jamie's graduating this time. Congratulations to you. But since this program, you're not a part of traditional graduation, you've got until final grades on December 9th to make sure you get all your things in there. Anybody have any questions on that? I think you've got everything in already for Dr. Steve. If not, he can chime in at this point.
They're all set. Yvonne's working on a couple things, and she'll have hers in, and everybody else is set.
Good. And don't forget to get all your things. If you haven't moved them over in TaskStream, upload your OMA and your AppSell in TaskStream and bring your other 4 over. Now, hopefully your transcripts will be available before Christmas, but don't bet on that. But surely, shortly after Christmas, your transcripts will be available. And for those of you who want North Carolina licensure, you go to DPI's website and fill out Form V. And again, Wendy will help you with that. You South Carolina people, you go to your DPI, since we're Cape. Now, you don't have to get North Carolina and then reciprocate. You can just get South Carolina now. But if you want them both and you're in South Carolina, you can get them both, North and South Carolina licensure. But if you just want South Carolina, now remember, you South Carolina people, you've got to take the praxis. It's the same one you take for your EDCI license, 5412. We talked about that last week. You North Carolina people, if you want your license now, all you got to have is your transcript and fill out the forms. You do not have to take the EDCI 5412 or the administrative 5412. You can take it if you want to. You'll be prepared. Once you've had 601 and 603, you'll pass that 5412 with flying colors. We've not had a person, not to pass it. As soon as you get 1 and 3, you're good to go. We even have our regular add-ons take it after 601 and 603. And they've all 100% pass rate for them as well. Everything we do is aligned with that. I don't know if you've noticed when you look at those rubrics, the grading rubrics, everything we do is aligned with all the standards and with the praxis. And so you'll be amazed how quickly that'll go, how easy it'll be. And then one editorial comment before we dive in tonight. Just a few minutes ago, I was reading Mallory's reflection from the first case study, and she said something profound that we all need to remember. And it's kind of the reason why we have you do all the activities in 603. Nobody can remember or know everything. You got to surround yourself with people that you can ask, or you got to know the people to ask in the central office or other more seasoned administrators than you. Don't be afraid to ask. You got to know where to go to for this information. It's better to ask than to get it wrong. And trust me, school administration is not one of those things where it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. It does not work that way in school administration. That will not stand you in good stead in this business. They hired you to know the rules and the laws, or at least to know who to ask about them. Just like I had you ask specifically about all the different pieces and parts in HR, employee assistance, and all those things, just to get you to understand there are people in your district that know all these things, and you've got to ask them. But don't make the mistake and say, well, I'll just ask for forgiveness. I'll spend this money, and if it's wrong, then I'll just tell them to forgive me later on, mea culpa. No, that's what the fellow in front of you in the employment line said as well. So, just remember that. So thank you, Mallory, for reminding us of that. That's a good reminder as we end up tonight. Anybody have anything before we dive in on our case study tonight? This was a big one. This touches about everything we've talked about this semester. Has a lot of different pieces and parts in it. It speaks to about everything. So I'm excited to see your presentation. So somebody get us started tonight. Who's going to go first?
Well, we can go first, and I'll share.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna do the first part for us. So, okay, here we are. We started out by just kind of giving an overview, and we did talk about how there were a lot of pieces. This was a good one for the last one. So there's Eugenia, who's the principal of the school, and they've recently adopted an inclusion model. One day she's approached by a parent, a third grade parent who's representing another group of parents, and they have some concerns about what's going on in class, particularly in one class where the teacher's name is Sylvia. And so these parents feel like Sylvia is overly concerned with the special needs student and neglecting the other students' education. And then they were also concerned that Sylvia was having the other students help or teach the special needs students versus focusing on their own instruction. So after she hears this complaint, it said Eugenia was surprised, and we air quoted that because we were surprised that she was surprised because she thought things were going well, right? I think that it actually said that. She thought things were going well, as you always do when you don't know what's going on. So then she consulted Ishmael, I think is how we said it. But anyway, we called him a technical coordinator, and we just took that as like he's an instructional coach type job. Yes, and that's correct. So she talks to him and says, hey, can you go look at these other two grades and see what's going on there, and I'll deal with Sylvia. So she called Sylvia in to talk about the parents' concerns, and then Sylvia is a bit offended and really feels like she's doing the right thing. In the meantime, Ishmael comes back to report that he sees varying degrees of support and understanding about the inclusion model. One grade just feels very strongly that the special education students should be left to specialists. Another grade is really supportive of the model and learning for all students. So that was just kind of our overview for it. Okay, so one of the first questions talked about was looking at the principal's approach in this situation and in future meetings with teachers. And so we felt like she didn't really have a plan, like Eugenia sort of lacked a plan. We almost felt like she was being a bit reactive. So the way she approached the issue with Sylvia set Sylvia up to be a bit defensive, automatically. And Sylvia, we felt like may have taken the conversation as, the principal supporting the parents' view over the teacher, which might damage the sense of trust that she has with Sylvia. And we felt like, as the administrator, you shouldn't just call a teacher in based on what someone says. You should actually know what's going on in the classroom anyway. And then definitely you should visit to know. So that was, we just kept coming back to that on each question. Really, as the principal, you should know what's going on in the classrooms, and you should also know, what's going on in instruction. But even before that, as the principal, she should have been a little more knowledgeable and been a part of the implementation for this inclusion model to get going. I mean, clearly there was a bit confusion and maybe some different interpretations across the different grades. And we didn't feel like, you know, if she had been proactive, she probably a lot of this could have been avoided by being involved in implementation and being in classrooms to know what was going on. And then we also just felt like she shouldn't send the instructional coach in there to see what's going on. That's her job. We also talked about the path that she should take. So if we were in that position and approached by a parent, we felt like the first thing we would do is we would hope we'd be in the classroom before that, but we'd get in the classroom and see what was really happening or not happening. And then after the observation of the visit, be prepared to talk to Sylvia. And if there was something that needed to be addressed or she needed support with, that we should have a plan for how to support her. So, right, we wouldn't call a teacher in and just be prepared to tell them all these things that were wrong without then being able to offer some kind of support to go along with our feedback. So that was one of the first things we talked about that she should do. We also said that really she should consider kind of the buy-in and the understanding for this inclusion model that they have to go on, because to us it seemed everybody interpreted it a little differently and maybe had different sets of expectations. So she could kind of get everybody back together and regroup, or we really felt like there needed to be some kind of staff development on the model so everyone was in the same page. And then kind of our third prong piece of that was, it really seemed like Sylvia thought she was doing the right thing. You know, she had a heart for teaching and a heart for all children, and she really felt like the reason she had the groups doing a bit of peer tutoring was a good one. She felt there was a good justification for that. But we talked about how we would have to help her understand that, you know, instruction is, and the ability to differentiate instruction is her role. And it's not, you know, you can't put other kids always teaching other kids in lieu of the teacher's instruction. So we would need a
So our next question is one point of view more correct than the other? We talked a lot about how one side isn't necessarily more correct than the other, but there is a lack of a plan. So you can tell that there's obviously no plan, no there was no common professional development done at the beginning of this. Inclusion looks a lot different all over the building, which when you're working with these special education students and law or legalities is involved, it's got to be right. And in this case, it's too all over the place. So everyone's views the inclusion model differently, including the parents. So there doesn't seem like there's a lot of communication between all the stakeholders. He doesn't want to talk to me until I get on here. And the issue of different understandings could be addressed, like I said, with the staff development at the beginning. So they really, at this point, since professional development was not done at the beginning, they need to back up and do some professional development that really ties what this inclusion model should look like across the school. Look at the data across the classrooms to see what is effective. The inclusion model is not the problem. The way it's being implemented is the problem. And again, that all goes back to the lack of planning, the lack of modeling, the lack of implementation. Children's families, there seems to be a lack of overall parent involvement because they're really going off of what the children are saying is happening, not what is actually happening in the classroom. We know sometimes that, yeah, well, obviously students only see one side of it, so they're going home and then the parents are just banking on exactly what the students are saying. So there needs to be some open communication about what inclusion is and what it should look like, and that stems from training not only for the staff, but for our stakeholders and parents as well. Encourage the teachers to communicate with the parents. And then this is what we talked about, which really stood out to me, don't single out just the teacher's classroom that we're talking about. For the family collaboration, it needs to be a whole school initiative so this problem doesn't pop up again. And make sure to maintain your FERPA rights. You cannot discuss other students. And then this is where parent nights can come into play, those events that get everybody really involved and everybody understanding what inclusion, the purpose of it is, what it looks like, and what it should be. And then operations. And then Ishmael could help with staff development to create those PDs that we're talking about, to set up the model and then the support that the grade levels will need when that inclusion, when the expectations for the inclusion model are set up and are communicated.
So what actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question? Make sure that she's communicating with all parents more effectively. Be proactive and involve them early. Capitalize on parents' willingness to be involved. So this is something big for me, is sometimes when a parent is bothering you, or they're like we say, helicopter parents. I mean, that's an opportunity to have some parent ownership in their child's education. So seeing that, it's not a great situation right now, but turning it into a positive because they want to be involved. Work to share student work samples and classroom assessment data with all parents. So making sure those parents feel comfortable with their child, they are meeting those standards. They might not see that it's a traditional what they're used to, but as we all know, education's changed so much since we've been in school. So making sure that, this is a big communication piece here. Help all parents see where their children are and how they are on track to meet and exceed standards. She has to maintain the FERPA rights. Like we said, she can't discuss specifics of other students with these families. So making sure that these opportunities that you're speaking to the parents about their child is that you're speaking directly about what they're doing and not comparing them to other students. So throughout our whole presentation, we're kind of bringing it together to highlight some legal and ethical concerns we found. First and foremost, the FERPA rights as students. Also, what we talked about earlier in the presentation, students are at school to learn, not to teach others instead of the teacher. Every student deserves a free and appropriate education. Also, and we didn't use this term earlier, but everything comes back to this, making sure it's the least restrictive environment is considered when we're doing this inclusion model. Teachers must follow students' IEPs. Principals must be part of making placement decisions. And that's it.
Excellent presentation. I better unmute myself. I flashed out there for a second. Dr. Steve, I'll let you start with questions.
All right. So I want to go to your thoughts again about, well, I've got a couple. So I'm gonna start with this one. We're all in schools and we've all experienced inclusion models. How many of you have seen effective inclusion models?
I feel like we do co-teaching. I've been at two different schools that have done inclusion, and the first one we were told we were doing inclusion, but we're given no guidance. So that was earlier on in my career. So I had an extra body in there, and I used them, and they were an EC teacher, but I used them as behavior management, which is what you're not supposed to do.
Right.
And then at the middle school that I worked at, we got trained on co-teaching. we were sent to seminars, and we had PD come into the building, and we got extensive training on co-teaching, and I felt like we were one team, and I felt like that inclusion model with the students that we had in the classroom, that was really truly effective.
Okay. Others?
I had one experience, and it was the only one in my whole career, of inclusion. And the teacher, the EC teacher who came in, she was very knowledgeable, so that made us more cohesive. And she didn't just come in, she knew the standards that I was teaching. I really understood the other students' IEPs and what they needed as well, so that we could know, you could just come in and we can help any student. She could help any student. And that worked out well. So it wasn't like she just pulled those kids to the side. They stayed included in the classroom. But the biggest piece that made it successful was our pre-planning together, where we already figured out what we were going to use and how we were going to use it.
Okay. And so to Mallory and Tiffany, you both have experience, and others I sure have as well. Who was the impetus behind the planning for you, Tiffany, the co-teaching PD for you, Mallory? Who pushed that?
With me, it was the EC teacher and myself, because I had
So it didn't come from the top.
Nope, it did not. Mm-mm.
Mallory, did yours come from the top?
Ours came from the admin over the EC department.
Okay.
They pushed for the co-teaching.
All right. So who has experienced successful, and this could be anybody, not just the three presenters, who has experienced successful inclusion where the push came from the top? Somebody give us an example of where that happened.
Do you mean the top like the principal or the top like the district?
Yes, from the principal.
Well, our district sort of, I guess, started the model, but we did have, I'm thinking of across 5 schools, different principals level of, I don't want to say buy-in. I think they all believed of it, but I believed in it. I just think different levels of like having a skin in the game, like knowing what's being a part of it and communicating and being supportive. And I'm thinking of one, not where the principal didn't support it, but just was less involved in instruction overall. And it was not as successful. Like, for example, when the special ed teacher was out, they'd forget to get a sub. So the classroom teacher's in there with, a bunch of kids, and she had little support. In that case, that didn't go well for a lot of reasons. And again, it would just always be like, I wasn't thinking of that kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Well, I'm just curious the purpose of this is to talk about what the principal could do different. And I'm trying to, there aren't many principals that are well versed in inclusion, nor do they have to be by any stretch. But I'm just kind of sitting there saying, okay, we're pretty, at least in this first presentation, we've been a little bit critical of the principal. And I want to know who's experienced a principal that's really made inclusion go better in a school. And the 2 success stories that were presented, neither one of them were driven by the principal. So why are we picking on this poor principal?
Well, I think principals don't know until they've experienced a lawsuit what they should have done differently as far as professional development. And any kind of training on inclusion is so diverse in how you effectively present that in a classroom. There's, several different models. There's 8. And, to have anybody, like Marilyn friend, for her to come over and do training, like that is so expensive. But I think in the long run, if you go through a lawsuit, you are just as liable for that money. But it goes back to you don't know until you know.
And with that kind of comes the experience. One of the APs at our school is a former special ed teacher. So she, of course, knows from experience and can bring that to the table. And she's kind of our expert in that realm. So if anyone has a question, that's who they go to. But not every school has that. In fact, I'm sure it's very rare. I know it's the first time I've ever seen someone from special education move up to an administrative role, aside from these lovely people here.
Yeah, that's a good one. And that's true. So, okay, so if we know we have to roll it out and we haven't been sued yet, as Lisa has inferred, although the parents are concerned, so maybe it's in the offing. How should Ishmael have been used? I mean,
he should have been used to collect data and do observations on the students, I would think, to make sure that everything's working cohesively, if that's his role, in terms of, also supporting technology.
And we weren't real sure, like, is he just a general instructional coach, or like, is his background in special ed? That might be different too, but we kind of interpreted it as he's just a general instructional coach. Like, I don't know that he would be the person necessarily, if that were the case. Maybe he doesn't have the background to support, the classes that are struggling with it. And also, didn't it say, and I might be getting another one, I don't have it pulled up, but he didn't have very much experience himself in his role. Wasn't he like which is not good or bad or indifferent. It's just thinking about that maybe he's never really been, he might have needed some support in how to deal with a big situation like that if he's just a new coach, Yeah.
Well, he was probably liked or not liked, because that was like her first go-to to send him into the trenches. So he might be liked by a lot of people, and he'll be able to get the dirt, but he should be used for professional development and to teach, like, the MTSS how to differentiate, because true inclusion, you should not know the difference that they're doing inclusion if you walk into a true inclusion classroom. So he should be helping, I would think, with understanding MTSS and the different levels and how to differentiate instruction.
Yeah, he's in control of that school's mission and vision when it comes to what strategies they're using and how inclusion looks in that school. And, from the case study, there's things going on way different in these classrooms that we're supposed to be implementing this model. And, as we know, as educators, certain teachers do certain things differently. But, for him to have to go in the classrooms to collect that data to see what was going on, that was proof to me to know you don't know what's going on. We just said, all right, this is what we're doing, figure it out, whatever, instead of providing, hey, these are some research-based strategies, these are some approaches, do the homework. And I think as a principal, I mean, I will say, my first 6 weeks in this position, when I'm looking, I'm not a previous EC teacher, like the whole EC field of things to consider. I want to thank the EC teachers in here, because wow, I had no idea the depths of everything you guys do. So I think it's almost impossible for a principal to be the subject matter expert on everything operating in the school, but you need to know enough to be dangerous in a good way, and make sure you surround yourselves with those people that fill in those weak spots that you can go to and ask questions for. And the principal needs to facilitate and use that instructional coach. That instructional coach, their job really is to make sure they understand what to do to make this happen, and make it work.
All right, so Dale, there's a lot I could say, but I don't want to fire all my arrows on this one. But when you get in this role of principal, I was being the opposite end of what I really thought. I mean, if you're the principal of the school and you've got classrooms independently working, and there's something to be said for some independence, I understand that. But if inclusion is our model, and we have people going in all different directions, it would be no different than a basketball team that was trying to run a set offense and everybody doing their own thing. It doesn't work. You've got to have this idea that everybody knows where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing, and it's a recipe for failure if you don't have that. I want to come back with the next one on the parent when we get the next round, Dale.
Okay. I've got a lot of things I want to say too, but I don't want to waste all of our time. I do want to support what Lisa had to say. MTSS, if you're doing it like you're supposed to, it is the coin of the realm. It is how instruction is supposed to be happening, and I'll support at least what Kevin said. That we should know what's going on in all the rooms, and that's what should be happening in all the rooms. And we have to get out of the office to know what that is. And if we don't know, we've got to ask people who do know. We got to bring the resources in. But I agree with Lisa, and I agree with Kevin that person, that instructional facilitator, they're supposed to know how this works, because it's not just inclusion. MTSS, we do this same style or supposed to integrate in every classroom. And so if our instructional facilitator doesn't understand inclusion in MTSS, I don't know that they can be a lot of help for us or to us. So that's just a thought, but that's kind of how I started out tonight. If you don't know, ask. And this is the perfect case study for that you may not have very much experience in EC, but you better find some way to get yourself up to speed. And like Kevin said, know enough to at least be dangerous. You've got to know that, but you are supposed to know enough about instruction to know, as Lisa pointed out, how it's supposed to be integrated. You got to at least know that much. And we could talk about professional development models. You've seen my model, MTSS for teachers. This is the perfect opportunity where we'd have whole group instruction for our whole faculty. We would do individual group work in PLC and share instructional strategies, and we do one-on-one coaching with teachers with our instructional facilitator. That's what they're there for. So this lends itself perfectly to that professional development model. Back to Linda Darling Hammond, where we do all three modalities of professional development. It does lend itself to that. All right, who's next?
I think that's us.
Okay, so Kelsey's gonna go.
Okay, so we have case study number 4, inclusive education, success for all or success for some. And sometimes it appears like it's success for all, and sometimes it seems like one or more merge ahead. Our discussion questions, let me move this picture here. How might the principal approach? I'll tell you what, I'm not going to read through these because these are all typed out and with the individual responses on the next pages. How might the principal approach this and future meetings with her teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? Well, first of all, you're going to begin with an observation, followed by a discussion of what is happening in the classroom. Of course, these observations should have been, at our school, we have, starting on week 2, our administration team walks through. They start doing not formal observations, but just classroom walkthroughs and give us initial feedback, so that when we get to our observations or when district folks start coming in, they want to make sure that we're all on the same board. So these are also followed by discussion of what's happened. They always begin on a positive note. Don't start out with a parent complaint or something that has transpired in the classroom that someone else has seen. Since there's no fireable, removable offense, there is time for observation and response prior to discussion, and addressing it with an immediate concern is going to establish a defensive reaction from the teacher.
So looking at the path that Eugenia should take, sorry, Pam, did I interrupt you when you were saying something?
Nope, you're fine.
Okay. So as has already been discussed, we also looked at it as Eugenia should have already been out in the school having routine observations and documenting what's happening in classrooms. The principal is responsible for all of the classroom curriculum that's happening under their position. So they should have a finger on the pulse, so to speak. Because Eugenia did receive that parent complaint, she should make it a point to get back out and visit each of those classrooms in the grade level where the complaint came from to observe specifically the inclusion practices that are happening and have a drop-in observation there. It's not expected that she focus on absolutely everything each time she observes, but that should be her focus after the complaint. Eugenia should have a conference with Sylvia to see where her practices align with the parent complaints. And she kind of did that within the case study. She sat down and talked to her and told her what was happening. But she should look closer at those practices post-observation and at the lesson plans and see where they align. Does it meet what the parents are complaining about, or does it completely have no basis? And then there should be meetings and trainings with all the teachers to establish a structure to be followed within the inclusion classroom. They should know what they're doing, and they should be doing it according to research-based practices, not just throwing the kids in there and hoping to sink or swim with the help of their peers. And all learning and classroom expectations need to be established by the teachers, and students and parents, all parties need to know that before the school year even begins.
Is one point of view more correct than the other? As far as perspectives go, parents will have a certain perspective on what's happening in the classroom because they want the best education for their particular children, their own children. Sergio and Sylvia have their own views based on individual teacher training and experiences, and formal training through professional development and forming expectations should be laid out by administration in order to address each opposing view and formulate a plan.
So what kind of collaboration should we see from the children's families that help improve the inclusive education program, that encourage an appreciation for diversity, and that stimulates the learning for all students in the school? Well, we already know there's a parents association, and that association should reach out to include more parents of special needs children in all of the activities that they're doing within the school building, whether it be meetings or school-sponsored events. They should also offer more activities and plan more activities that promote an appreciation and understanding of the diversity and the culture within the school community. And that includes your students with special needs, not just your ethnic cultures. And personally, we felt that Eugenia should become more involved with the Parents Association. It seems like she is slightly, but only when the bad news kind of comes up and is brought to her. And our integration specialist, or the head of the integration program, needs to hopefully work with the Parents Association and Eugenia to create learning nights and activities for both the classrooms and the family. The inclusion teacher should be in the classroom assisting the learning of the special needs students alongside the traditional teacher, not just there to facilitate behavior management, which I know was mentioned before. I think Mallory said that's how she used an inclusion teacher in the past. I've done the same thing. But if you're not told the best practices and best ways to do it, how are you supposed to know? Oh, there it goes.
Okay, as an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ismail, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of the differences in opinion among the teachers? Professional develop on special needs specific topics and integration should occur regularly throughout the school year. Now, in this past summer, Alicia and I, along with Judy Mills, created a BPLM on inclusion called A Sense of Belonging, and it's published on the Gardner website, and that addresses everything inclusion. everything special ed. So not everything special ed, but everything inclusion models. So that would be a very good resource for districts to use in training all teachers. Ishmael should also visit classrooms to assist in and observe integration practices with all teachers and students.
And that's, of course, assuming that he is serving as an instructional coach based under the technical coordinator job title that he has. So what actions should they take with the families of the children in question to share their achievements and experiences? Student-led conferences are always a great way to start. Have the students showcase what they've learned. Because when you go home and kids are tired at the end of the day, I think anyone who's ever had children or worked with children know that, how was your day? Good. What happened today? Stuff. It gets the kids talking about what they're learning in class and better showcasing what they have learned and how they've learned it. They should encourage the parents to work at home with the students, practicing with the materials they've learned in class. And then have the students write reflections that showcase what they've learned, and that incorporates both an academic and a social aspect with that, because when students are reflecting on what they're learning, they're reprocessing that information again. And it's also another piece of evidence that can be used as data for those of us in administration or as teachers, or for parents to see, what exactly is my kid doing in school?
Okay, so for our 4 ethical paradigms, again, we have justice, care, critique, and profession. For justice, giving the teacher the benefit of the doubt through historical or current observations and data collection, allowing all parties involved to present their concerns about the situation, and referencing Brown versus Board of Education, which is a landmark case in equal opportunity for education.
So thinking about care, our principal, Eugenia, should keep the conversation positive and supportive among all the stakeholders. Should maintain supportive and encouraging opportunities and exchanges with all stakeholders while ensuring that there is achievement happening in the classroom. And then the stakeholders encourage positive communication and establish relationships with Eugenia, with the various parents, to collaborate about what's happening in the situation in the classroom and the decision-making processes. Now, of course, that's looking more at your school improvement council as opposed to your parent association, because like has been previously mentioned, you don't want to talk about anyone else's child specifically with people who are not that child's parents. But looking at everything that's happening and having an open communication and relationship always helps things go a little bit smoother.
So for critique, while parents have the power to make complaints about their concerns for classroom procedures, administration has the right to align teachers' instructional facilitation with district and site procedures, policies, and curriculum expectations to back up that teacher. Decisions made at the site or district levels must be based upon the right decisions for equal education. And these decisions can be challenged by parents through due process if the situation cannot be resolved within the group.
And finally, thinking about profession, decisions that are made during any collaboration should take into consideration the needs of the students, the parents, and the teachers. But of course, most importantly, the student and they're our main purpose in education. Education should be equitable and reasonable for all students in the system, and the decisions that are made should be made not just according to the suspicions. The suspicions allow us to look further into it, but they need to be backed up by facts, and there needs to be evidence provided before any decision is made in any situation that we're dealing with. And
that's it.
what we've got.
That last slide on the references, it has the link to the digital commons at Gardner Webb for our VPLM on inclusion practices. If anyone's interested in visiting that or sharing that with their district, their principal, or any type of college you're affiliated with, we would appreciate that.
Okay, questions? Anybody have any questions? Any comments? Steve, I'll let you start us again.
So I would like to know from this group a little more specificity. What would you have done if you were Eugenia?
Hopefully not gotten to the point where a parent complaint tells me that I need to go look and see what's happening in my classrooms.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yes.
I didn't. So assuming that you've already blown that one, what would you do if you were you? And I know nobody in here would have, but Dale would have already blown it.
I would have already blown it. That's the truth.
And Steve certainly would have.
I'd have been hanging out at the lunchroom down at the gym.
So assuming we've already blown that one, we've got what we've got. What would you have done if you were Eugene?
First step would be to get myself into the classroom to see what's actually happening, to observe and take notes. And then have some conversations with the teachers in question and start building evidence to support whatever conversation's about to happen.
And I wouldn't just have the observations if I were Eugenia, I wouldn't be the only one doing observations. I would make sure there was another member of administration, maybe an instructional coach who was going in also to observe, because you need to have multiple sets of data.
Okay.
Data collection to compare.
How long would it have been for you two? How long would it have been before you would have approached Sylvia? I mean, would it have been immediately that when you got the complaint, you wanted to talk to her, or would you observe first for a while?
I think I would probably have observed first.
Yeah, I would sit and observe. You don't want it to extend too long because the problem continues persisting with no pushback or response from administration. Your parents are just going to get angrier. But you do want to have valid understanding of what's happening before you open the floodgates within your school building.
And it also depends on, does the teacher know that the parent has made the complaint? If this is a full-on anonymous type of complaint, or if this is something that they know is going on, the teacher knows there's been a complaint, so maybe there's a way there to have a conversation prior to, but with no observation, with no current data, observational data, you'd have to go in and see what was going on first. Okay.
Well, I think where I was going with this one, and this is probably going to be my wrap-up comment, but the thing about it, even going back to the first presentation and then this one and most likely the next two, we can be critical of Eugenia in a variety of ways, and we will continue to be. The thing that stands out to me in a learning piece, one of many, would be, you know, if I'd have kept a journal, and I probably should have, and those days where I really messed up, and those weeks that I really messed up, these things that I didn't do as I should have done as the principal of the school, how I react to parent complaints or teacher complaints or whatever, when deep down I know, had I done a better job of my job, we wouldn't be in this position. How I react to that is going to be critical. And, you know, to a certain extent, I don't think you just need to stand in front of your faculty and just beat yourself up to a pulp, because there's this give and take. But I do think that there has to be a plan to recover from what was clearly a mess up. And so I think that, and Dale will say this better than I do, but when you mess up, don't make it any worse. Figure out a way to get it fixed in as good a manner as you can. And if we go back to the first group where the questions were being asked, if we need to bring people in to do training, then we can do that. But we need to, acknowledge that, dadgum, if I'd have had my finger on this pulse, we'd have never gotten to this point. And maybe I need to be the first one to get some training on how to lead in this particular issue. So I just I think how we handle parent complaints, it would be good to talk to Sylvia, but almost in a conversation of tell me what you would have needed to do this better, instead of why didn't you do this? And maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's where I would come from. All right, that's my sermon for this one, Dale.
All right, 3 metaphors here. When your horse dies,
he'd say it better than I do.
3 metaphors. When your horse dies, get off. Don't just keep beating a dead horse. Won't do any good. What do we got to do to fix it? When you get in the hole, just the first thing you got to do to get out of the hole, stop digging. Again, you got to quit what you're doing. You got to make a change. And number 3, and this is for all administration, this is what Steve's referring to. The best way to get out of a swamp, don't get in it to begin with. There's no easy way to get out once you're already in it, and that's what he's talking about. You're going to have to take a beating here. You're going to have to get you with it because you didn't do what you need to do. I mean, what do you suspect is going to be that principal's response when their immediate supervisor comes at evaluation time, or when, as Lisa said, this hits court and they said, could you share with us your walkthrough data, what you saw when you were in the classrooms? That's the first thing you're going to ask. I've asked that question myself. I had to ask it at a high school. Unfortunately, I had to ask that question over EC. Where's your walkthrough data? What have you and your team seen when you were in that classroom? Well, we don't have any. Well, again, circle back to the three metaphors that I have. I do want to ask one follow-up question on the parent association. What happens? You said you need to get a closer. Hopefully, they can help you with spreading the information to other parents about the inclusion model. My question is if what if the people who are your movers and shakers that are your parent association, what if they are the parents of those regular ed kids who are making this complaint? Can you depend on them to help you out of this situation? Or are you going to have to develop your own marketing plan yourself where you educate parents?
I think at that point, you're going to have to develop your own and hope it educates these parents as well.
That is the correct answer, Kelsey. And so if you were in our regular 3-semester add-on, the very next thing we would teach you after the OMA would be the SCIP, the School and Community Involvement, where we would develop a marketing plan just for this purpose. That is the next evidence in our sequence, where we teach you that you have to go out and educate your parents. And you got to have them to come to your school for more than a ball game, a dance, a talent show, a step contest. You got to get them there for academic things. And so we teach you the first thing is do a needs assessment for gaps in communication. Just because you put a poster up or send a flyer home don't mean they'll come. And so the notion is you fill in your gaps of communication with social media, Facebook, Instagram, those kinds of things, where we can get, when we get that hook in the parents when we're communicating, we get them in for this very purpose. We can't depend upon our parent associations to do that, because sometimes they aren't very active, or in this case, if they are active, they're actually they're in competition. They're on the other side of the fence on this one. So you have to make sure that you understand that, yes, we'd like to involve parent groups as much as possible, but we can't depend on that. We have to understand we have to develop our own marketing plan. And the thing to remember about that is having parents in your building will only help you academically if they're there for academic reasons. Having them come for a ball game, you know, if it was only about the number of parents coming to our campus, we could do three things. In the western part of the state, we'd have a womanless wedding. In the Piedmont, we'd have a barbecue. And in the eastern part of North Carolina, we'd have a donkey basketball game. If we do those, we'd kill it. We would kill it. I have seen with my own eyes 40,000 people on a high school campus at Independence High School back in the 90s when they were just killing everybody. Won 10 titles out of 4 AA titles in 11 years. Just, you know, they have 40,000. We had 40,000 people at a ball game. You know what it takes to motivate the resources for 40,000 people coming for a high school football game, but their test scores didn't go up a bit. The whole notion here is just getting parents on your campus just to get them there will not do you any good. You must have a purpose. You got to have a plan, and they've got to be there for academic things. And it's help us help you educate your child. Let me say that again. Help us help you educate your child. We've got this notion that it's our sole responsibility to educate. No, our job is to help parents educate their children. And we got to get them there for the academic pieces. And so we got to be careful and understand we got to be intentional about how we educate and work with our parents. We can't just expect them to show up, you know, do buddy lunch or whatever. That won't make our test scores go up. That won't help us with that. All right, next group. Who's next?
I think we are.
All right, Shanda, go right ahead.
Okay, I can share my screen.
All right.
Okay, so I think we all know the case study. And looking at this, just coming at it, understanding really quickly, one of the main factors is that the parents are already making comparisons between, and I'm assuming that 3A and 3B might be something equivalent to third grade or third year classes.
Yes.
So basically, the parents are already making comparisons and saying, well, this class is not doing this class is doing better. We want that for our kids. So understanding that the parents are not necessarily gunning to be angry. They really do have some concerns on behalf of their children.
Mm-hmm.
So the principal is looking at this almost in a hindsight situation. At least that's how I took it when I read it. So she's looking at this as, oh, okay. So yeah, we say we're doing inclusion, and apparently that looks very different from classroom to classroom. So our approach was more or less, how can the principal, she can't really get in front of it. The horse is already out of the barn, since you like those metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
But she can move forward from here. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the approach we're going to take. She's going to pull in the tech coordinator. That kind of blew my mind. I'm not 100% sure what that terminology is supposed to mean in Chile, but I was thinking like computer lab, so it was sort of entertaining for us. But the tech coordinator has been called in. The tech coordinator has gone and gotten the information, and he has come back to her and said, hey, look, this looks different everywhere we go. And the principal says, okay, well, let's call a meeting and let's clear this up. So that is where we are starting. And I think, Bianca, are you picking up from here?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
So our first question, how might the principal approach this and future meetings with her teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? So we discussed that the principal should provide the meeting topic and time allowances for all teachers to share their concerns in advance. The principal should ask a neutral party, such as the technical coordinator, to share research regarding inclusion. The pros of providing research could give different strategies for the teachers, or just an understanding of what inclusion actually is. The cons of that would be you're still in the same boat, kind of sort of, with will they even implement those strategies or use the research that you provided, and then offer procedural structures. And it is necessary for all educators to agree and work toward the common goal of educating all students. And so for this question, we all agreed that an ethical paradigm was justice. And what is the path that Eugenia should take? After hearing your questions and concerns of all teachers, the principal should form a professional learning community with goals which include a meta-analysis of available research for inclusion, a study of successful programs, an action plan for the creation of school-wide procedures and or restructuring, a family and community outreach plan to involve and inform all stakeholders, an establishment of a data team responsible for gathering and analyzing data, the impact of the school's efforts, which we talked about, that data team being a group of people who just don't say, okay, we tried it for a month, it didn't work. But a group of people to say, okay, this is what happened the first month we tried it. This is what happened the next month we tried it. This is what happened, to just keep that data and keep up with everything to see if the program is improving or not improvement, or what adjustments need to be made. And the ethical paradigms for this question were care, profession, and critique. Is one point of view more correct than the other? Why? Inclusion is not mandated at either the federal or state level. Not enough comparative data exists to conclusively support either view. Studies regarding mainstream versus segregated students with mild exceptional needs indicate that mainstream students tend to perform better. And Success for All program evaluation indicated benefits for all students when interventions were applied early and continuously, not a remedial program. We felt as a group that this was a loaded question. It's not a law, so it's kind of, that's the issue, that it's not mandated. So the focus should be more about equity and least restrictive environment. The ethical paradigm we discussed for this question was justice and critique.
Okay, so the next part we talked about is what kind of collaboration from children's families might the principal and teachers propose. So we really felt that it was really important to get the parents involved as much as possible, really to gather their input, share our plan, and also to really get them involved in the decision-making process so that they would be, on board with us in terms of trying to fix the problem, since we realized that there was a problem. So I guess owning up as a principal, to try to find something that would be better for all students, and really just creating that action plan and making sure that the parents were involved in it. We felt that it was really important to reach out to all parents, so especially those that were less involved, to really educate them in terms of what was going on in the school and what the school was going to do in terms of transitioning to a better model. And also, involving the parents in character education lessons, whether it's, social, emotional, inclusive lessons as well. Then continuing on, we felt that the parents really should have guarantees as the school was going to commit to the plan, that we were going to focus on setting high expectations for all students, that, we were really going to push for that to happen. And we were going to do that by collecting data, establishing an action plan, and then also, as we talked about it, just really focusing on training and collaborating to make the process better for all students. Rejection of prescriptive remedial instruction strategies. So really just working on trying to include the parents as much as possible again. Flexible learning environments, having highly qualified professionals on site, We thought that it was really important to emphasize having smaller teacher ratios, as we felt that that would reach students better, especially those that needed it in any manner whatsoever. And then have that ongoing and welcome involvement to parents. So really to show them that we are working towards making things better and having family and community outreach events. So really just to have this to really have the whole community involved in helping all students achieve their goals. And so in that sense, our ethical paradigm was care and profession. Okay, so we felt that as an expert in the area of learning evaluation, what might Ishmael help out with? We felt that he would be very good, very useful as being that person who could listen actively to what was going on, to hear all the voices, to take on that teaming approach, and to help the school decide as a whole what they were going to do next. He would definitely be helpful in not necessarily choosing a side, but just being that mediator that could help to see what the whole issue was, because we were coming at it from the principal approach, and then obviously the teachers, we wanted to work together, and we felt that he could help out as that almost like a third party person in a way. And then as plans emerged, we thought that the policy decision was just really open to an appeal. So really just to keep it open and flexible as we were learning throughout the process as well. So ensuring flexibility, learning is preserved. And so ensuring that a continuum of options is clearly stated so that we're really keeping it open, that we're trying to make progress. And so again, our ethical paradigm was justice, care, and profession within this instant. And then with our last one, what actions might Sylvia take with families of children in question? So we understood that there was obviously some concern by the parents that felt that their child was not receiving the appropriate education because of the model the school was using. So we really thought that one way that we could, find out more about this would be to have a parent focus group to really hear their concerns, things that they were hearing from their children or just their concerns in general, and see if there are any themes that we could identify as we were hearing their concerns or their perspectives. And then present that information to the school or discuss that information through a PLC and during a family and community engagement event. And then again, this is really coming at it from the paradigm of care. And then that was it. Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Steve?
All right, so I'm going to start this one off with one that I think all of you are more than gifted to answer. What kind of data would you collect? You use that as a strategy for several of your answers. So what kind of data are you collecting?
I would
say,
do,
okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I got them all answered, didn't they? That's the wonderful thing about being with CNI people. I'll tell you what, y'all can fire away. And I am curious, seriously, that's not a cynical question. I want to know what kind of data you're going to collect.
Okay, I would collect look at their common assessment data, past, present common assessment data, and then even go in and collect like student engagement data. So what's going on in the classroom right now, and the common assessment data will let you know what's been going on in the past to see if the methods that the different teachers are using, are they effective? Are some more effective than others? Now it's your turn, Kevin. Sorry.
No, kind of going on what Mallory was talking about was student engagement piece. I would actually draw out a diagram of the classroom and where the students are sitting and actually track the movement of the teacher throughout the classroom, because there was a concern they felt like the teacher was spending way more time with the EC students in the class. So actually tracking the movement and saying, yeah, the teacher's, providing a little more attention here, but these students are working on independent work over here. So actually having a visual, diagram to go off of with like timings and all that stuff.
I like that.
Yeah.
Those visual maps are a part of the shift in observations from summary to evidence. So that provides a clear picture for anyone who is interested in knowing what's happening. Instead of it just being a summary of what's happening in the classroom, they've got a map. They can look and say, oh, this is exactly what that teacher's doing. Yes, this is right, or yes, this is wrong, or we need to help her out. Or leave her alone.
And adding to engagement, you could also kind of tack maybe a behavioral piece also, because it could be that there may have been some issues. Like we know that sometimes students with ADD or students with other issues kind of maybe cause distractions or whatever. But if they are engaged, then you can go back and say, well, your child was actually engaged in this lesson and able to do whatever, and they weren't distracting the other children, which actually makes for a better lesson. So I think there's pieces to that engagement piece.
All right, so I'm gonna give my editorial comment. Do you think, it's a question in the form of, it's the comments in the form of a question. Do you think Eugenia knew to do that? I mean, if she didn't know what was going on in the school to start with, do you think she knew to do that?
I think she acted in a way to protect herself. So she reacted instead of taking the time to investigate. So she wanted to get in there and fix instead of trying to figure out what exactly should she be looking at. Because honestly, they're going off the word of children right now. That's what everything's stemming from, is what students have said. Nobody has been into the classroom until she told the instructional coach to go in there to actually look at anything. So she's reacting in a way to fix things, and she's not being proactive. She's being reactive, maybe.
She's continuing to dig.
Yes.
The hole deeper. There you go.
I thank you all for those answers, and I know there's more to that. That's leading to my editorial comment. As Dale and I have continuously stated in here, I think that probably the curriculum and instruction leadership piece would benefit from more discussion of the managerial piece, and the leadership programs, MELS, EDLS, would benefit more from the curriculum piece of how you folks know to observe, to collect these data, to build a plan based on that. That I fear a lot of our principals, and many of you work with them, and certainly a lot of our superintendents are not versed in and are not gifted with. So your answers were beautiful, and those of you who want to get into school-based leadership and district leadership, you need to understand, again, as Dale gives you all of these warnings of, you better know how to do this, you better know how to do this, which he's 100% correct about. You need to understand how far ahead of the game you are, because you know the answers to these things that Steve Laws didn't know when he was a principal. And I'm going to bet Dale didn't know when he was a principal. That you know. Now, Steve had to learn and Dale had to learn, but we didn't know it. You already know it, and you need to feel really good about it. And so I got to tuck that away for you to help you tuck it away. The second question I have with the group that presented, this is the superintendent in me. You had a line in there, and I don't remember which slide now, but you wanted to reduce the student teacher ratio. Y'all remember that? And that's beautiful. What's your plan for paying for that? Or how are you going to achieve reducing the class size ratio?
I don't know exactly what the options would be in any given situation. However, some of the models for inclusion, because one of the things that we kept coming back to in the research was that everything has to be a continuum of interventions, a continuum of placements. So one of the models was not just inclusive practices in the classroom, but I think we've already discussed it, co-teaching and things of that nature. And just what, at least in South Carolina, I've heard it mostly called the push-in program. So not necessarily taking kids out to serve them, but bringing the services to the child. And that could be in the form of several special needs students being served in a general education classroom by more than one teacher. So it's not necessarily juggling numbers so much as juggling the intervention style.
Okay. All right, that's a good answer.
Yeah, because as we have learned, that if you get an allotment of federal teachers, which are EC, and you get allotment of state teachers based on enrollment, and if you want to reduce class size beyond that, who has to pay for those teachers? That would be the local, and they're strapped with capital needs, because remember, state and feds don't give you money for buildings and to keep the ones up, and so the local is strapped trying to keep the buildings, a roof on the buildings and heat and cooling in the buildings themselves. And we don't hire nearly as many local teachers as we one time were available to do. So again, that factors in. We might can reorganize, but certainly if we had to add professional staff, teachers, we would have to find the money locally to do that. There won't be an allotment coming beyond what we already get. I like your PLC notion in the last presentation. I'm a big believer in PLCs. Steve was talking about we didn't know a lot of these things when we started. A lot of what I had to learn, I learned through PLCs. And one of the things I really like about them, talking about data collection during your PLCs, but I also like, and I used to have my folks do this a couple of times a month, is when they would go to PLCs, not only look at the data, but share strategies. This is what has worked. That's data as well. What has worked? I can get up on the roof of this building if you give me enough steps, if you scaffold me. See there, I learned a word from CNI. If you scaffold me, I can get up on the roof. But if I'm probably not going to make it if you just have to go back and get me a run and go and try to jump up there all at one time. But you've got to, you've got to scaffold your teachers as well. You've got to work with them too, desired behavior. And the big part of that is what worked for me? Well, what worked for you? Sharing the things that do work, those shared strategies in those PLCs. I think that's just tremendously powerful in PLCs, is the sharing of strategies. And I used to sit on, because I needed to learn that kind of thing as well, because I didn't know. I'll be the first to admit I did not know. Remembering as a high school teacher, my first principal job was in elementary school. I didn't know how to spell kindergarten correctly. I put a D in it. And so you have to learn those things, but you're exactly right. Now, one of the things you talked about when you were talking about is one method more correct than the other, and you're talking about that inclusion is not federally or state mandated. If it's locally mandated, it's still law. And so one of the questions that you're going to get, if you look under the interviewing material section that I have, and it's kind of self-explanatory, when you do virtual interviews or mostly any kind of the first level interviews that you do, they're going to give you a scenario where there's something that your district does that's a local policy that's not federal or state law and that you don't agree with. Would you still implement that policy? And the answer, of course, is yes. If our district says we're going to do inclusion, then we're going to do inclusion. That's your job to make sure that it happens. That's why they hired you. You don't teach a soul. They hired you to make sure that everything follows through with fidelity in terms of how it's supposed, what we want to happen is actually happening at your building. All right, who's doing the last presentation tonight? Alicia.
We are,
That's us.
but Lisa's going to share her screen.
All right, Lisa.
All right.
Look at those Thanksgiving colors.
I know. I told Lisa that I was going to have to steal this and use it every fall now.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to start by doing an overview of the case study. And I know that this has been kind of explained before, but it was a semi-rural village. And they even mentioned that she only has a couple of years. They mentioned her age. And we all know you don't talk about a woman's age. Like, they shouldn't have thrown her out like that, but it's okay. And then they're explaining that out of the 300 students, that 60% of them are from disadvantaged families with low income. And so it's very similar numbers to a lot of the areas that we have around here, but we actually have a higher number in the county that I'm in. And so what happens is that the parents are concerned and they bring it to the principal about there not being enough attention on the students that do not have disabilities in the classroom. And so Eugenia asks Ishmael, who's the technical coordinator, and we also had that conversation about, like, what is a technical coordinator, but he's going to go in and observe. And so based off of that observation, Eugenia actually talks to Sylvia, and then she actually gets really defensive. In fact, in the case study, it says that Sylvia's face turns red because she gets defensive about what is said. So the first question is, how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? So we discussed that in future meetings, you need to bring facts to the meeting. So you don't need to go based off of solely what the parents have said, which is coming from students. Not that there's not validity in what the students are saying, but as an educator, I respect it more when my administrator comes to me and says, hey, you know, I observed this in your classroom. Here's some next steps, or here's what I suggest based off of what I've seen. In fact, if there's been a parent complaint, he actually will call me and say, I've never seen this in your classroom, but this is what's being said, or this is what's happened. So we have a conversation about it. So in future meetings, it needs to be based off of respect, mutual respect, and then there needs to be some next steps for everybody. So the approach that we would take is that the principal should have conducted the observation to clearly see what's going on in the classroom. And, you know, we have walkthroughs in our district. In fact, we normally have like weekly walkthroughs. So somebody's constantly in there, and just being more visible as an administrator or even the technical analyst, just so that that conversation is there. Having the facts, not just the opinions of parents. And the principal should ask if the parent expressed their concerns with the teacher first. So we understand that this came up in the parent association, but has the parent, once this child came home and said, this is going on in my classroom and we're being the teacher, did this parent first then contact the teacher and say, I'm just curious, this is what's being said, instead of forming a group of little hens and then immediately going to the administration saying, this is what's going on in this room. And then also discussion intention versus perception with Sylvia. So in her mind, she's doing exactly what is needed for these children. So your honors kids, and the biggest thing that you hear is, if you understand it, then you can teach it. So in her mind, she has good intentions as far as she's helping the children with disabilities. She's helping strengthen the children who are honors kids or have better abilities, but when it's perceived from the outside as a parent, and I actually asked them a couple of questions. I don't have kids, so like, who do you go to first? Do you go to the teacher or do you go to administration? And so we were having the conversation about intention versus perception. So even though Sylvia might have had the best intentions, the perception of what's actually going on might be completely different. And then the path we were discussing is the principal should conduct the formal observation, which I mentioned earlier, to understand what's actually going on in the classroom, and then follow up with the observation with a conference with Sylvia. So a couple of things that we identified was FATE, IDEA, and LRE. So with FATE, it's all qualified persons with disabilities are entitled to free appropriate education, public education, and all persons have the right to the least restrictive placement and access to free education. So that's where our inclusion comes in, and that they can be included. And I know there were several cases and case studies that we looked at in the mainstream versus inclusion PowerPoint, and depending on what's going to be best for the student is going to be the kind of case or the kind of decision if it went to court. And then with IDEA, which was actually amended in 2004, it's the equality and accountability and excellence in education for children with disabilities, and then the least restrictive environment for all students through updating annual goals through IEPs. So basically, following the law, just making sure you are following the law and giving the students everything that they need. Lisa, you're on mute.
So to continue what Alicia was saying, is one point of view more correct than the other? We said, hands down, you need to follow the law. And that true inclusion models, when the person is entering that classroom, they would not be able to identify those levels of ability, and that you would see that specialist and the teacher working together. It's not oh, the EC teacher's here, now I'm done, or vice versa. And also the inclusion specialist should support the classroom teacher in everything that they're doing. Professional development on that inclusion model, that seems to be a definite need for this school, so that we can see how that ebb and flow would work in all of the classrooms. So with collaboration with the families that are involved, we know that the principal should not be speaking to other families. That is, she needs to maintain FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. And we need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all students without disclosing pertinent information for one side or the other. And with that collaboration with the education program, you want to make sure that you provide a whole school program, whether that be that educational, the PTA night, diversity night, parent night, but you want to make sure that you do that without singling out a particular group or a particular classroom. So again, making that whole school wide. Mm-hmm. And then as the expert in the area of learning and evaluation, we discussed that Ishmael could hold and should hold those professional development trainings with best practice, also with understanding assessment to drive instruction. So his ability to understand technology assessment, especially during remote learning, if this was like a COVID situation, that is definitely a plus that we want to play into. And then we also want to make sure that we're utilizing him not only at a core supplemental, but also intensive tier level to provide training for staff, so that we can see those different levels of support in a classroom. The one thing we talked about is that Ishmael cannot conduct that formal observation and should not have been asked to do that.
And then the next question was, what actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question? in order to learn and share their achievements and experience they have observed among the children. And one of the things first, like Lisa alluded to, is that she needs that training on MTSS and how to provide those differentiated tiers for not only her core, but also her supplemental and intensive group students. And she would need those additional trainings, and not only her, but a school-wide thing. Someone else in another group, I can't remember who it was, but alluded to it shouldn't be just her. It needs to be a grade level, or I'm sorry, a school-wide implementation to, since this is one problem that came up, you need to think of it, it could be a school-wide problem. So just implementing those trainings for everyone. Also thinking about that frequent contact with the parents regarding the student's academic process. And as we said, maintaining those FERPA rights. So the teacher should be in constant contact with the parents. So these parents shouldn't really have these type of questions if the teacher had maintained that contact with them, because they would already know on the front end what their child is doing as well. Also during like parent night for students, for the parent night for all the students and the parents, the students can share their portfolios, what they're doing, and that goes into basically reviewing also the teacher product. As a principal, the teacher should have documentation of what she's doing and how she's helping the children, and this is what she can share with the parents as well. Go to the next slide. For the paradigms here, we just thought about the different ones and how they affected this particular case study. So it's justice. It was interesting to see the reasonable suspicion of probable cause. That's, thinking a crime is going to happen or can happen. And when we looked up like crime is anything that can be prosecuted legally, basically. And so if she is not if she's doing anything illegal in the classroom, then that's the issue of justice for either of the kids, not just the EC kids, but also the regular ed kids. For her care and loyalty, we thought about this on the principal's end. When the principal is having to deal with the particular situation where it seems more personal for one particular teacher, the principal has to maintain that level of loyalty and trust that they do not want to break the bond with the teacher, even though the principal has to have this critical conversation and make sure that there's a trusting environment. And based on the case study, she became upset. So we were wondering, like, we were trying to figure out, did she just walk out? Did the principal say the conversation was over? But it seemed like she just got up and was leaving. So you want, as a principal, you have to be aware of those dynamics and keep that trust there. Also under care, making sure that you're supporting the teacher for growth and supporting the teacher to where this is a problem, we acknowledge it's a problem, but how are we going to get you to grow as a teacher? You can go to the next one. And then for critique, the power, as a principal, you have to be careful about, you do hold a certain level of power. And even though the parents are complaining about the teacher may be able to handle that more than when the principal, it sounds like the principal is complaining about the teacher. So that is why it's important that the principal did the walkthrough first, and they had their information and came to the teacher with what they saw, not so much what the parents are saying. Also with the critical theory, the principal needs to analyze all parts of the situation, and that's coming from that data collection from the teacher, and determine the correlation between the parents' view and actually what the teacher is doing. Under the profession, the principal has to be aware of what's happening in all classrooms, and staff should know the expectations. So sometimes as a principal, you have to make sure, is this person doing this because I haven't told them? Or are they doing it because I have told them and they're just going their other route? As a principal, you have to make sure that they have that awareness of what they're supposed to do. When you safeguarding the democracy and equity and diversity, you have to think about the whole, everybody. I know we were focusing on the kids, the EC children, and there was the parents who were not the EC parents, but you gotta think about all the kids. And if any group that's something is taken away from you, or something is being imposed that is not right, that becomes an equity issue for any group. And then to teachers to be working in the best interest of the students, but not at the learning expense of other students. And finally, as far as the best interest of the students, the principal's best interest of the students is making sure teachers are knowledgeable, making sure teachers are following the law, and making sure that they are basically doing what they should be doing in the classroom to give that equitable education to all their students. And that is it.
Excellent. All right. Steve?
Yeah, I thought that was terrific too. This brings us to, or brings me to, the last argument which was made here, and that is that equity is a 100% thing, and one of the things that we focused on tonight and focus on so many times is the groups of kids who are not given the same benefits as others, and we tend to put all of our efforts in trying to make it better for them, and it is often at the expense of the academic achievers. And this case study, and this is why I think Dale said this study runs the gamut. We get into all of it, and these parents who are concerned that maybe we're putting too much emphasis on another group at the expense of my children, it's an understandable argument, and it seems to me, if we want to really get into why school choice is such a big thing, it's to a great extent that parents of the academic achievers don't feel like public schools now are addressing the needs of their children. And so this case pinpoints a lot of things, a lot of shortfalls that are common in schools, and certainly one of those is how we address students with learning challenges. But another is, how do we meet the needs of kids who are achievers? The achievers teaching or working with the kids who struggle, granted, that's a great opportunity for them, and it is a great learning opportunity for them. But is it pushing them in an academic sense to another level, which many parents are wanting? Is it challenging them to go further with their academic knowledge? They are teaching the ones who are struggling things that they already know. These academic achievers already know how to do those things. And so we're not pushing them to learn new things. We are helping them to communicate with groups that they may not normally associate with, which is a very beneficial thing. But the academic piece, many parents are wanting their children to be pushed to another level, and I fear that we have missed that boat. So this group, I thought, when they brought into the equitable thing, really hit on that, and I commend you for that. I think this case, we didn't spend a lot of time on this, but as a principal, you have to be able to see that we're going to meet the needs of every child, and the children that we're losing in public schools are the academic achievers. And if we continue to lose those, then we're going to continue to struggle with academic performance in a report card, and we're going to continue to struggle with the voices that we need politically to get the funding we need to take care of all children. And we have to understand that. And I think we have, I think our most underserved population is the gifted group. I think we have done less with that group than any group that we have. We have not succeeded with any of the groups, but we have done less to try to succeed with the gifted group, in my opinion. and we're going to have to address that. I'm going to tell you what I think. You don't have to agree with it, and you probably shouldn't agree with it. That is what I think. We have underserved them, and that's why we're losing them. Okay, that's my editorial comment. Now I'm wide open for y'all to tell me I'm wrong.
Nobody? And I'd take my shot if I got it.
Well, I mean, I know that's a...
These people, I'm telling you, these CNI people are just too nice.
Well, or they know this is their last night and they're getting ready to eat turkey.
Yeah, getting ready to eat turkey. All right, so...
Listen, I mean, I know that that's a challenging statement, but I mean, if we look at the rise of many charter schools and certainly the private schools, this is one of the challenges we have is can we meet these needs? And if you look at the funding for gifted programs versus the funding of the other programs, I mean, it's just not remotely close, and we've got to figure out how to meet the needs of every child. So I was glad to see the word equitable, and I think that's what you were inferring, is that Sylvia, Eugenia, the whole faculty, they need to try to address the needs of everybody, and I think this school was failing, and I think it starts with Eugenia because she clearly was not cognizant of what's going on in classrooms.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go through some random things here that I want to make sure that we kind of remind ourselves of. I think Shanda, one of her responses, reflection, was talking about, caught her ear, was parents are going to come in and say the most shocking things. This is what happened to Eugenia. And as the one group pointed out tonight, she got very offended, very defensive, and even got up and left. That's just digging the hole deeper. You may not agree with what parents say, but you can't overreact. Especially you can't become defensive and become angry or confrontational. That's not going to help. In this case, as Steve was just pointing out, as we talked about last week with our week before last with our funding case, where the superintendent wanted to Robin Hood, take from the wealthier and the more capable academic students and give to the least capable. That's Robin Hood, and basically that's what was going on in this school as well. We were improperly using our gifted kids. We were using that resource to give to others. Again, you're going to have to be equitable. I know sometimes parent groups can be aggravating, and to that end, I believe Alicia called them the hen group. You're going to have to deal with some of those hen groups, and the key is that when they give a snappy little acronym as their name, you're in trouble. Until then, they're just kind of just a loose collection of kooks. But if they get organized enough that they get an acronym, like here in North Meck, they're called FUME, F-U-M-E. If you get a group and they get an acronym like that, oh boy, you're in trouble then. But you got to be able to deal with all parents. Steve is correct in that we only see equity in one way, and parents of gifted kids and regular ed kids, they want their child to be served as well, so you can't rob them to it. This case, I know this might be a stretch for some of you who are not on the managerial end. This kind of case, this all started when kids went home and told their parents what was going on. This is one of those antecedent behavior things that you may get caught up in due process over, with those kids not being very kind. You can tell from the parent reaction that the kids didn't go home and say, oh boy, I get to teach the other kids in the room. They probably went home and said something derogatory to begin with. So this is another one of those things, antecedent. If you don't know what's going on, you let things like this go, this leads to a lot of animosity and bullying in your school. especially that classism that goes on. You know, we try to avoid that as much as we can. And we don't want to single out our EC kids, and we don't want to single out any kids for derision. And I'm afraid this kind of falls into that, and we have to be careful. Under the guise of antecedent behaviors, this won't end well. Your professional development plan, it's got to be comprehensive. It's got to have all three types of all three modalities, whole group, small group, PLCs, and one-on-one. Your info session, I love that I had already written this down, that your info session is for all parents. I think Lisa group made that point. I love that notion that you shouldn't be singling out the different groups. We should have parent information for everybody. Even if your child, you should hear it for every child in the building. Your parent groups have to be all inclusive. Make sure that you don't assume that people will just show up. You've got to make sure that you don't have gaps in communication to all the different groups in your community. Again, the response should never be to the question, where's your walkthrough data? The response should never be the pregnant pause of the chronically stupid. That's a biggie for me. I want to see that walkthrough data. I want to know that you're out in the room, no matter what the situation is. Have you been in the rooms to see what's going on? Do you know what's happening in the building? That's what we pay you to do, is to know what's happening in the building. PLCs, you need to be intentional with your PLCs that at least twice a month you share strategies, teaching strategies in your classrooms. Local mandates, local board policy is law. Federal law, state law, local board policy, that is law. If your district has made this decision, as Lisa's group pointed out, follow the law. If your district adopted the inclusion model as the way that they're going to do least restrictive environment and meet the needs of those kids, then it is law. You have to follow it. Whether you agree or not, unimportant. We don't need your agreement. We just need your acquiescence. We just need for you to follow the rules. So this case does hit on a lot of things. It hits on equity. It is one of our problems in our business, is that folks with regular ed and gifted kids feel like there's too much emphasis being put on EC children and low wealth kids and the lower performing kids, to the detriment of their child. They understand, and rightly so, that resources are not infinite. They are finite. The Robin Hood effect. If you take, if you give to another child, you have to take from mine. That was the whole Leandro case, for you to understand that if we manipulate the money, it's got to come from somebody else. There's no new money coming in. These are all things that you got to know. But as Steve pointed out, you folks are all wizards with instruction. That gets you such a leg up. Now, I don't pretend or advocate that simply because you've been with Steve and I for a semester that you know all the managerial piece. What we hope is that you know enough now to ask questions and find people who do know the answer. I'd find me somebody like Lisa. For tonight's case, I'd find me somebody like her or Pam, people who work in this area. You've got them in your building. You've got them in your district. I would find those people. I'd find somebody in HR that knew about compensation and the benefits and those things. I saw an excellent response tonight about, you've got to make your financial secretary can help you so much with knowing the codes and what money can be spent for. But there's also people in your central office that know those things. You can talk to other administrators on how they do discipline. These are the kinds of things that the learning curve is not nearly as steep as what you folks have on the instructional side. these are things that you can ask people that you've got folks there who have the expertise and the information that can help you. But you've got the one thing that is the hardest and takes the longest and is the least available, and that's the instructional piece. You folks have that. And so you should be successful. We will, again, Wendy will help you with your licensure. Luann and her group will help you. You got to apply for graduation. You don't participate in the ceremony, but we are going to do a little ceremony afterwards, the MELS program, if you'd like to join us. I'll be getting that information out to you. That will be on December the 12th. I think I've already sent that out. Dr. Steve Stone, who works with both MELS and EDLS, is putting that together for us, for our folks, and we'll invite you, and it will be at the ceremony that morning is virtual at 10 o'clock, and then we'll have hours for all our add-on folks at 1 o'clock. And so I gave him all your names, and you should have gotten an email from him to send in the information for that. I made sure that you were included because you are part of us. You've switched over to the LS side now. You come to the dark side with all us heathens now, but we're glad to have you. We've appreciated the time that we've had with you this semester. I'll open up the floor now. Look at us. We're going to finish on time. I'll open up the floor now for any comments from the group, good, bad, otherwise. We're not fishing for compliments. Anything that you'd like to add that we need to do better or more of, or what you did like or didn't like, but now's the time. Or you can send it to it privately. We'll accept it privately as well. But if you've got a public comment, here's your chance.
What time is that ceremony on December 12th?
This graduation piece is at 10 and ours is at 1. And it'll be virtual. Okay. We'll do a virtual, but now ours will be live. We'll do a virtual, and then if you send in information, Steve does a slideshow kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Jamie, you're graduating with your doctorate, right? So I don't think you've gotten the notice yet, but EDCI and EDLS are having a virtual at 12:15. So you're pretty much shot.
Okay, say that again. I'm sorry. I knew about the graduation at 10, but there's something at 12.
You're gonna have graduation at 10, and then you're going to be invited to a virtual reception for EDCI and EDLS. I think it's at 12:15.
Okay.
And obviously, it's up to you whether to come or not, but you'll be invited.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. That'll be nice. I
then,
didn't know about that yet, so I'll put it on the calendar.
Yeah, and then MELS at 1, and then somebody will come up with something else at 3, and but anyway, it's going to be a happy day for those of you who finished up stuff. So we all wish we could be together.
Yep. It'll be a happy day.
And Dale, I'm going to make that editorial comment, Dale. We've said it before, but you and I, every once in a while in the afternoon, we're together on campus, and we have lamented how many times that we never were able to be with this group face to face on a Saturday. And you folks have been just fabulous to interact, but it is not the same as a Saturday. When we can be together, the debate is just different when you're face to face, and all of you know that. So we're sorry, but we also are thankful that you have participated to the extent you have. You've made it just wonderful for us, and I do thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I thank both of you because I feel like I've learned a lot from both of you. Y'all are very knowledgeable. Know people we know, so we know you're valid. You've been there, you've done that. Just your experiences.
Thank
I mean,
you.
now, I'm sorry, Dr. Lamb, Dr. Laws does hold a little more weight with me since he's a Wake graduate.
That's right.
Wake Forest. But I love you too, Dr. Lamb.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, anybody else? Well, again, we thank all of you. Prayers for your safety. Please try to stay healthy during the holidays. Again, you have until Wednesday, December 9th, to make sure to get all your work in. If you need anything, you can always call, email, I'll Zoom with you, whatever you need. Wendy will help you with your licensure. Luann and Sherry in the registrar's office will help you with transcripts and those things. So if there's nothing else, everybody have a good evening, and we'll see you again soon.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.